Hi, this is Congressman Tom Cole, the 4th District of Oklahoma, and this is another one of our congressional chats. I will tell you, Washington has certainly been busy on a whole variety of fronts. I'm going to talk about some of the ones that I've been most associated with and then speculate about some of the others. It's been a big week if you're on the Appropriations Committee or chairman of that committee. We're beginning our work for the next fiscal year. We've been having hearings. We actually had 2 bills marked up and reported out of committee this week. There are 12 basic bills that fund the federal government. These weren't large ones, but they were important ones. First, and frankly the one I was most pleased with, was what's called Military Constructions and Veterans Affairs. And I was pleased with it because we increased the resources there. And frankly, we saw the 2 parties work together in a way that's pretty rare in Washington, D.C. The chairman of that subcommittee is my classmate, my good friend, Judge Carter. We say judge because he was a judge for 20 years before he was elected to Congress. We were elected the same year in 2002. We both were a long time on the Appropriations Committee. He's chaired a number of the subcommittees, the one he does now, and I think the one he's always cared about the most is looking after the men and women that are veterans of the United States and providing services for them. He and his working partner, Democrat ranking member Debbie Wasserman Schultz, put together a bill that both of them would tell you, and they did in the committee, they need more in the way of resources, particularly for funding military construction and particularly for doing more for military families. But that bill got passed out of the subcommittee 58-0. This doesn't normally happen at this stage. And it's a signal that both parties are very, very committed to meeting our obligations to our veterans and to providing the construction that we need for our soldiers to do their duties, but also for their families to have a decent place to live and for child care to be available on a military basis. We know what the sacrifices military families make for our country are. It's never just the person in uniform, be it mom or dad. It's the spouse and the whole family behind them that are supporting that soldier and their mission that makes the difference. And we need to look after them too, because they sacrifice just as much as their parents or again spouse do. Look, I grew up in a military family where my dad was career non-commissioned officer, and my brother and I moved from place to place, and we saw him times when he was deployed away from us. And my mom was very selfless in her support of my father and his mission, and a lot of the parenting responsibility fell to her because frankly he was working long hours and sometimes not around the house in a way that he could be available. Every military family puts up with that. Deployments, frequent moves, changing school systems, moving away from friends, trying to make new friends when you're a young child. Again, most Americans do honor the service of the people in uniform. They need to always remember there's people out of uniform around them, their family, that are carrying part of the burden too. So getting things done to look after our veterans who have sacrificed so much, extraordinarily important, and then helping the men and women that are serving. We got that bill done. Second bill that we got done this week, again, not a particularly large bill, but a very important bill, was, I'm just going blank here. Oh, it's called FSGG, Financial Services General Government. And this isn't one of the bills that people think about, but it funds the IRS. It funds so many of the agencies that look after the day-to-day operation of the government, the Office of Management and Budget, many other sort of cats and dogs agencies, but they don't get their job done. The government doesn't work very well. This is a more contentious bill, passed out on a party line vote. Look, Democrats usually want to spend more money on these things than Republicans do, but let me tell you, we'll work it out. We worked it out last year. This bill passed out of committee on a party line vote, but then There were negotiations, and it eventually passed with a substantial bipartisan vote in both the House and the Senate. That's what I would expect. So that's two of the bills literally now ready to go to the floor of the House, and then from there on into negotiation with the Senate. We also marked up two more bills, national security and related programs. That's what funds the State Department, and our involvement around the world, military sales, those sorts of things. An extraordinarily important, agency, and again, one where there's always going to be a lot of contention. And we marked up at the subcommittee level the agriculture bill. And that's something that there's usually quite a bit of bipartisan cooperation on. I think there will be as we work through the bill, but it's everything from crop insurance to conservation programs to cutting edge research for the ag industry. We all know agriculture is under an enormous amount of strain right now. The international market is very difficult. The cost of inputs, fuel, and fertilizer, the cost of equipment has gone up enormously in the last few years. And so I expect we'll be doing more than just this bill. But this bill is the basic bill that funds agriculture, and we'll be looking at other ways to be helpful to that industry as we go forward. So that was kind of my week. Two bills out of committee, two more out of subcommittee prepared for markup next week. Congress is also working on a lot of other things, as people that follow closely know. Even though people at the Department of Homeland Security are getting paid, that can't go on forever because the agency still hasn't been fully funded. We have funded it in the House multiple times. We have a majority of people that have supported our work in the House and the Senate, all the Republicans, a couple of brave Democrats. But Democrats continue to hold the Department of Homeland Security hostage. They're mad about the Border Patrol. I don't know why anybody would be mad at the Border Patrol. We're now in our 9th month without a known illegal entry into the country. You can thank President Trump and the Border Patrol for doing that. Then there's a lot of anger over what's called ICE. That's Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Our friend Mark Wayne Mullen just left the Senate to head up that agency, so he's caught up in that. And this is a lot more than just Border Patrol and Internal Customs Enforcement. It's the Coast Guard, it's the Secret Service, it's FEMA, the Federal Emergency Response Agency, it's the TSA, Travel Security Administration. So when you show up and get on an airplane, you're not worried there's somebody on there with a bomb. Those men and women have been, frankly, treated terribly last year and this year because they've gone through many weeks and sometimes months without getting paid. Always made up in the end, but nobody should have to live with that. Everybody every month, has usually got a pretty regular set of bills. They've got a mortgage to pay or rent to pay. They've got a car payment to make. They've got a family that needs to be looked after, that needs to know that paycheck is going to be there. So we're still working on completely funding that agency. Honestly, I would say the president has done a lot of things, and my friend Mark Wayne Mullen have done a lot of things in his brief time that I'm shocked that the Democrats aren't willing to fund them. The president changed the head of the agency itself, which no Democrats seem to like. Secretary No. He changed who was in command at Minnesota, where there was a lot of controversy. There are investigations going on, and things were handled appropriately there. Mark Wayne Mullen has changed some of the ways in which immigration and customs enforcement operate to make it more user-friendly. But these are essential services. These are federal law enforcement people. I would always remind listeners and our viewers that literally 75% of the people that work at ICE are either military veterans or professional law enforcement. And are there one or two bad apples amongst them? I have no doubt. In a population that large, thousands of agents, There are, and mistakes get made. But almost all of them are incredibly honorable, run terrific risks to their personal safety, and now, frankly, have been demonized by some Democrats as if they're doing something wrong by enforcing the law in our own country, and that's just unconscionable. These are federal law enforcement agents performing an important role. They ought to be fully funded. We're going to continue to work on that problem. I know the Speaker's working on it. We're working on something called FISA, which we've reformed pretty dramatically. These are special courts that frankly have hearings over whether or not people that are in the country inappropriately or people that are federal agents can be legally surveilled. Provides a lot of our intelligence and early warning network about potential terrorist attacks. So it's something that needs to be funded. We brought it up last week, weren't able to get it across the line. Almost every Republican voted for it. Essentially every Democrat voted against it. And then we had a small group of members that were worried there needed to be more protections for the individual in there. There's nothing wrong with that concern. I will tell you, the debate between the appropriate balance for individual liberty and national security is an ongoing debate in American history. It's the most fundamental debate in democracy, and it has been in our country ever since our country came into existence. How much authority should the government have to surveil and protect ourselves from dangerous adversaries, and how can you do that without infringing on the privacy and individual liberty of Americans? So balancing that out is an appropriate debate, but we shouldn't ever risk losing that ability, either the FISA courts or the authorities that are granted in that appropriations legislation. If we do, we run a risk. So the Speaker's made this a high priority for the White House. I think we'll probably get it done in the next week, but last week, again, we tried, didn't get it passed. We did a 2-week extension, so this is an issue that's going to be coming up again. The parties that have concerns are in negotiation with the Speaker. For most of us, it's not a tough vote. I'm always going to put security of the American people first, and I'm comfortable that the reforms we made the last time we considered have basically let us clean up some of the problems that existed in the past, and certainly the President has asked for what's called a clean extension. Just take what's there now and extend it for either a year and a half or up to 5 years. We think it's operating fine, but again, we have some members that have individual concerns. They're not willing to vote for the bill, and frankly, right now, we have Democrats that, frankly, were fine with all of this when President Obama was in office or President Biden was in office, but sometimes they seem just reflexively against anything President Trump does. The last matter I will mention on what went on this week is, of course, the continuing situation in Iran. We have had on and off again talks with the Iranians. It's hard right now to know who really speaks for Iran. I think it's been so bludgeoned in the recent attacks that we'll hear one thing from the foreign minister, then another thing from the Iranian Republican Guard, the kind of extremist of what's a theocratic and terrorist government. And there's clearly power struggles going on inside the country itself. It's making negotiations more difficult. Of course, it's caused an increase in oil prices, not because we're dependent on it, but the global market is dependent on that, and real hardship is falling. We're paying a higher price. That happens when part of the petroleum supply is cut off, but our supply is not in danger. That's not true in Asia, and that's not true in Europe right now. So, but the president is determined to make sure Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. He's right about that. He wants Iran to be forced to quit exporting terror in the region. He's right about that. He wants to degrade their military capability so that they are not a threat to their neighbors or to American forces and interests in the region. And again, he wants to make sure that this kind of regime never gets a nuclear weapon. Those are all the right things to do. I think he's made considerable progress on this front, and I wish him well. It breaks my heart to say this, but I do think some of the political opposition to the president is so unhinged. They actually are sort of rooting for the Iranians to be successful in this. They shouldn't be. They should remember who and what that regime is, that they've been killing Americans for almost half a century now, that they're the largest sponsor of state terrorism in the world, and that despite what they say, they've consistently tried to acquire nuclear capability, something the president and every other American president in modern history has said must never, ever happen. I agree with that. I wish more of my colleagues in the House and the Senate agreed with that and gave the president the support he needs to bring this to a quick conclusion. I think when our enemies see division at home, it actually makes them fight harder and longer and hope America will quit or we'll have some sort of political upheaval that upsets what's been a brilliant military effort to date. Again, busy time in Washington, D.C., and all that's happening at a time when we're moving into an election year. You see primary contests, not just in Oklahoma, but in every state in the country, a lot of positioning going on. The struggle for control of both the House and the Senate is going to be hard fought and close this year. That complicates, honestly, what we try to do legislatively. But I would say overall this week, it's a pretty good week. When we're moving bills out of committee and we're making progress in negotiations on important things like FISA and fully funding the Department of Homeland Security, then that's a good thing. And we'll continue to work hard. We'll continue to report to you regularly. So in the interim, just good luck to you and your family. God bless. Hope all in your home are safe and secure. And again, we'll keep working to try and solve real problems. As I often joke, try to do the Lord's work in the devil's city. But that's what Washington, D.C. feels like sometimes, but it's also a place where a lot of people work hard to serve the country and the American people, and we're grateful for that. So look forward to talking to you again soon.